True living Africa. True living Africa.
Hello. Welcome to True Living Africa, your wellness podcast. I'm Uyok Hansen.
And I'm Oyin Talabi.
We are your health and wellness coaches. And we are here to help you live your best life.
Yay! Hello, good people of Africa. Welcome to True Living Africa. This is Oying.
And this is Uyok.
And today we're going to be talking about what?
Flexibility. I love flexibility because we know how useful it is to be flexible.
See, some people's minds have already traveled, but let's bring it back home.
Traveled up and down.
Mm-hmm. Let's bring it back home.
Okay.
So, we decided that we were going to do a series on the pillars of movement.
Right.
And, we were starting off with flexibility. Flexibility being the least popular of all.
Exactly, because people are like talking about strength and cardio and, you know, but flexibility is something that we often overlook because
we leave it for the gymnasts.
Right.
And
exactly,
the yoga
we
people,
think exactly.
That's far from what
we're talking about here.
Yes.
I mean, it's great for athletes, but for your normal everyday life. I know we're huge on functional fitness, aren't we?
Exactly. And
flexibility is one of the pillars of functional fitness, because obviously if your muscles and bones are not moving in its full range of motion, then we have a problem. And we found out while we were, training and all of that people who are super flexible live longer.
They do.
Right.
They do. So what is flexibility? Let's go back there. So flexibility is the ability to be flexible.
My daughter would say, but you just use the same word in the definition. How is that a definition?
But flexibility is one of those words that we sort of use. Mm-hmm. We use it in different aspects, but and it means basically the same thing, which is the ability to stretch, the ability to bend,
right?
To your full. When talking in the body, in the physical
aspect.
Yeah, physical aspect of it. It's about the joints and the muscles being able to stretch and bend to their full range of motion.
Yeah.
So, for your joint, being able to get it to the very end of its ability to move and then bringing it back to the start position. Same thing with the muscles as well. Stretching them and then being able to come back to their original position. Stretching them up to even maximum,
right,
and making sure they don't snap, and then bringing them back. So, we've all played with rubber bands, and so stretching that rubber band and bringing it back to wholeness.
Picture you want to have in your head.
Exactly, when you're stretching. And that's actually a good picture to have because it will help with certain things, with how you move and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's the definition of flexibility. Now, and this can also apply even in your mind as well, because when your mind is flexible, it means you're open, you're able to receive different things and also come back to your starting point and not be wavered by different things.
So you need to be flexible. It means you have to have the ability to move in any direction, and to just sort of
go with the flow.
To go with the flow, exactly.
And still be able to retain your original
form and shape.
Exactly.
Or not lose your mind.
Exactly. And not lose your mind. That's really important. That's, really mental resilience. But anyways, coming back home, flexibility. So what are the benefits of flexibility? You already started with one.
Let's just keep right through. But, before we dive into the benefits of flexibility, there was something I thought about. And, when we talked about doing a series on movement and the fundamentals and the pillars of movement, it's amazing how movement is so overlooked, right?
So overlooked.
And and this came up because, when we were doing this whole step challenge, and we realized that there was a particular Sunday that I hadn't recorded up to 500 steps, and I'm thinking, what could I have been doing that day that I hadn't walked even 500 steps. Was it even 500 or
Mostly
100?
horizontal.
Right, I was mostly horizontal. But then when you think about everyday life, and when you don't make a conscious effort to move, especially in our present day and age, where technology has sort of overcome everything, and we're so sedentary. Unlike our forefathers. You know, when we think about movement, back in the day when we were hunter-gatherers, we did everything our bodies were meant to do.
Exactly, and the body's primary function is to move.
Right.
Get
to
from
push,
point A
to pull,
point B.
to transport.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've lost that essence.
We've lost that, but we still have our bodies, don't we?
Yeah.
And so we've had to create these artificial movements that we call exercise.
And that's where exercise comes in.
And that's where exercise comes in. So it has sort of replaced the movement of our forefathers.
Yeah.
And we have to sort of simulate all these things either in a gym.
Yeah.
Or, with a video.
Yeah.
And we have to now do that with the full knowledge of how the body works.
How the body works, how it moves, and then putting all the different pillars
into consideration. Because you could do flexibility from now till forever, but if you haven't developed either strength or cardiovascular endurance,
you're still not going to get the full.
Incomplete.
You're not getting the full benefit of. You're not going to still have a fit body.
Right.
Still not. You're going to be lacking.
Right.
And it's really interesting what you said, taking it back to our forefathers, because then they would. You've seen Muslims pray, and the way when they're doing the ablution, the way they squat down very comfortably, feet flat on the floor, and they stay there. They wash their hands, so they have that flexibility in their lower back, in their glutes, in their quads and hamstrings, because of that regular movement that they're doing. So it's a way of life.
I totally agree with you.
So for those of us that don't have to, that don't do ablution and stuff like that, we're having to exercise, as in go into a stretching
to be able to
come into that.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing the breathing, the breathing exercise, and we had to sit in asana and all those positions. And the first time I tried it, I was like, oh my goodness, my ankles are gonna snap. Like I could not. And then the
more
knees
you do it,
but the more I did it, and then I also realized at some point that my kids couldn't do it when I asked them to, and they're just they're not even 10. So this just goes to show that we do need to
work at it
and be very conscious of it. Not losing our flexibility.
And we do lose flexibility as we grow older. As we're getting, by the time we're hitting 30, you're not as flexible as you were at 20, except you are working at it and pushing through. I know.
So our benefits of flexibility, apart from the one that I
you didn't even go into it. You didn't mention it. Go into it. Say it well.
Okay, so I will say it properly.
Yes.
So one of the benefits I found about of flexibility is obviously, so this is PG, married
PG
people
here.
only. When you are, having intimate relations and you really want to...
You need hip work.
You need hip work. And when men get older and they lose their ability to quote-unquote function, what happens first is that they lose ability to move their hips. It's not that they're not getting the arousal or reaction, right? It's that the hips don't move as well. So already the mechanics are sort of failing before even the main equipment fails. So
interesting.
So that the ability to just sort of be able to keep moving is critical to be able to maintain sexual health for as long as possible.
Same thing with women, to even be able to receive.
Right. And so you want to be able to, and not, like some guy says, oh, I like, a certain age of women because they're like, no, don't bend my legs or whatever. But you do want to be flexible so that you don't suffer.
So that your legs can be bent.
Right. So, moving on very quickly.
It's good to have bent legs sometimes.
Yes.
But moving on.
And that was my number one thing, and I don't know why.
Another thing about flexibility is the ability, it reduces your risk of injury. Like you said, like we said earlier, as we grow older, we get tighter, we lose flexibility, which is basically what Uyok just described happens with men as they go older and that function. So now, being able to, when you're flexible, your reflexes are quicker.
Right.
So, you can then jump out of the way, to avoid hitting something. It reduces your risk of injury. And one of the things that is prevalent with older people is hip replacement surgery because of that lack of flexibility and bone density.
Yeah.
And however, hip replacement is also one of the most painful surgeries ever. You don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. So you will need to stretch, particularly the hip area. Not just particularly, everywhere. But it's very important. So that's another point on flexibility. Another one is,
so for instance, when I work out, when we all work out, what stretching and all of that does, the ability to stay flexible helps sort of prevent and remove the lactic acid buildup in your body.
Yeah.
And so when we finished, and it's a note to our buff guys who go to the gym,
our runners,
whatever form of exercise that you're doing, so long as you're working at it and you're heaving and hoeing, once you drop the weights, once you stop running, once you stop doing whatever it is, you need to be able to restore the length of your muscles, and we're going to talk about how later on.
Balance.
So, and restore your balance, and that helps you, that burning. So when people say, oh, what's lactic acid? So that burning sensation you feel after exercising or even during, and it prevents you from really going further. It's kind of like your body's signal to say, oh, I've had enough.
Yeah.
So to take that out of your muscles and help restore the length of your muscles, flexibility is super important.
Think about when you wash your shirt or you wash your clothes, and you have to squeeze out the water from it so that the clothes can dry properly and retain their form. That's exactly what Uyok has just described to us, and it's very, very necessary. It helps your muscles, it helps your body repair and heal after, because remember when you're doing especially like strength training, which we'll talk about, you're almost tearing the muscle.
You are tearing the muscle, the micro tears.
Exactly. So when you stretch, it helps it to heal properly. And then remember as well, when you're exercising, your muscles are warm. I know, so it's a good time to stretch.
That's true. That's very true.
I know. So stretching after then helps you after the exercise while it's warm, so that when your muscles then cool down and contract, it's not going to become shorter.
Right.
Because that's what happens when you're exercising, which we'll talk about in the strength when we talk about strength training. But your muscles after exercising, it starts to contract when it cools down, and you don't want to be like an ape man.
You don't want to have the Johnny Bravo look.
Oh yes, Johnny Bravo. Yes. We don't want that look. It's good on Johnny Bravo, but not in real life.
No, not in real life. And that's what happens. And a lot of people don't really understand how you sort of get stuck in certain positions when you strength train. But the truth is, they're not, we're not elongating the muscles, stretching the muscles properly.
Yeah, we're not helping it come back to its original shape.
And then after some time, you actually, when you have that look, you actually lose the ability to do the full range of motion with certain workouts.
Because your muscles have now covered, your muscles overlap, and your muscles and connected joints overlap your joints.
Right.
So your connective tissues, they overlap your joints. So now if your muscles are contracting or are taking a form, it's going to pull the underlying structure into that same form. So you sort of have a rounded upper back. Like you said, your shoulders can't go as round. That ball and socket can't go round. Exactly. That's because the muscles over the joint. So the joint itself may not have started out tight, but because the muscles over it have restricted that movement, then gradually the joint itself starts to lose even the ability to go its own range of movement, its own full range of movement, and then you get stuck.
Yeah, you do get stuck.
Yeah, and that's, it's part of what happens with back pain as well. A lot of people that have back pain, it's really because the muscles there are tight from all the sitting, lack of stretching. And then that sort of
brings what's that we call it, the tension in your body. And then that's another thing that flexibility helps us to do.
Helps to remove tension.
It helps remove the tension in your body. And that's why when we go for like massages and they need our muscles and
they need you like they're making chin chin.
Yes. And they use the rolling pins and whatever they've got.
Yeah.
And the tension could come from either stress or strong emotions.
Yeah. And it's interesting, it gets trapped physically. So those are mental, emotional emotional
the mind-body
stuff.
connection is it's amazing.
Yeah. It's interesting. And, people that flexibility helps concentration. So obviously if you remove all the tension from your body, then you have a clearer board to process things from.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You feel sharper and all of that. So, and just to recap the benefits, we talked about reducing the risk of injury. We talked about being able to move through your entire range of motion without pain or stiffness. And
keeping sexual function, very important.
Function, very important for a happy relationship. And, we talked about taking out lactic acid from your body. Yeah. And then store
removing tension from the body.
But we say, yes, as you get older, you lose flexibility. But what are those things that really affect? Because I find that
hasten the process.
That hasten the process. Because I know that I'm in certain situations where I'm like, but I could do this just yesterday. What happened?
Even before you go into that, I've realized that certain days are more flexible than the others. Right. So it has to do with my hormones.
Okay, that's first off, yeah?
So you can, it affects, so certain days I can touch my toes in a certain position. Other days my body's like, are you joking?
Like, no, we're not here today.
Not today.
Yeah.
And also that happens particularly with women and our menstrual cycle.
Right.
So it does affect. And I read something that even the moon affects the stage of the moon. This is our bodies and stuff. It's interesting. But that the moon cycle affects how flexible.
And that's where the phrase menstruation came from the Latin root word menses, which comes from the moon. So
interesting.
Because the cycle follows the woman's typical cycle.
We need to talk about the menstrual cycle. That's interesting.
Follows the cycle of the moon. And
it does. It does.
Just one of those trivia things.
So what else?
So I know, for instance, that temperature affects flexibility.
Temperature does.
And so
it could be
like in a cold environmental influences. So if you sleep in a cold room, for instance, and you wake up with stiff, achy joints,
that's why it's the temperature. It's not necessarily your mattress.
No, but then it also is staying in the same position for a long time.
Yeah,
that happens. Like when you sit for long periods and you get up, you feel you do get tired.
Yeah. So, and then what you're saying about the environmental temperature also has to do with, can also feed into time of day. Time of day when you decide that you want to exercise or you want to stretch. So we're more flexible in the afternoons when it's warmer.
Right.
And as opposed to early in the morning. Yeah. And at night when it starts to get cooler. Then another thing that affects flexibility, lack of movement. So like structurally, so let's take the spine for example. Most of us do not exercise our spine. We don't move our spine. We just keep it in the position that it is. Not just in the position that it is, we even slouch on top of it. So we even take it out of its own natural curvatures.
Okay.
However, some exercise methods like Pilates helps you to
Yukon is one of the best Pilates coaches ever.
I am. Thank you.
I owe my flexibility to you.
But you have to be able to move through those joints.
Right.
If not, they start to fuse together, and then we have a problem.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we could, would love to dive into the internal and external influences of flexibility, but we're running out of time. But we'll cover that in a follow-up episode. And so, to catch the rest of the podcast and the follow-up episodes, as well as our previous episodes, please log on to www.africabusinessradio.com. You can follow us on Instagram at True Living Africa, Twitter as well, and Facebook, and at Africa Business Radio.
Africa Business Radio.
On Twitter and Instagram.
Yes.
And until we continue the flexibility discussion, see you next time.
Stay safe.